Scott, how have you been doing?
There we go. Okay. Um, I think, let's see, we've got quite, yeah, there's 17 of us on, and there's about 36 registered. That's pretty par for the course. So, but I would like us to get started, and I'm very pleased today that we have Heather Bright, who will be doing the program Tracing Roots, a genealogical case study, taking us through her research into her ancestors. So take it away, Heather.
Good morning, everyone. Um, I'd like to start by saying you guys have all probably done this longer than me and have way more experience because I kind of just did mostly in 2020. But so I am from, I'm from Oneida, Madison County, which is just the next county over from Onondaga County. And yeah, my mom's side of the family, I don't know much about my dad's, but my mom's side, my mom had sat down and tried to do her genealogy when I was younger, and I kind of thought that that was weird because I knew we came from Peterborough. So Peterborough is a little town next to, most people know Morrisville, the college. It's just a little stop, um, and I knew it was a stop on the Underground Railroad. So I thought everybody had come up as slaves, and I was trying to figure out, like, why are you going to keep going? Um, I thought we were all slaves. So we started here. Let's see if I can share my screen. Um, so anyway, I took over in 2020 because I jumped on the fact that Ancestry, the library edition, was free. And I, let's see. There. Can you guys see my screen? So let's see. Also, forgive me, I haven't made a presentation since college. So I hope it all goes well. So this is my grandfather. He had lived in Oneida and his family is from Peterborough. And when I kept so I started with him and his brother's obituary and found his dad and learned more about Peterborough. Garrett Smith here's a picture of Peterborough, and then here's Garrett Smith. He was an abolitionist. He was one of the secret six. He was known in Syracuse. There was a little thing called the Jerry Rescue about a slave who was freed. He worked with Frederick Douglass. He worked with Harriet Tubman. So all of that has a rich history in Peterborough, and you can learn more about that at the National Abolitionist Museum. I mean, they have an Emancipation Day celebration. And so I knew that there were some ties to this history, but I didn't know all of these ties. And I didn't know quite when everybody in my family came up to this area. And there are stories through Peterborough of him bringing up his wife's his wife was from the South and she wanted the person who had been like her nursemaid up. And this woman is the daughter of her nursemaid. So there are grand stories of how he brought them up. And we all descended from this woman. She was called Viney. She died well before I was born. Her mom died, I think, in 1925. And so the story was that all the Black people kind of had just descended from this Russell line of people. And so I started doing my research and started to realize that Milton here, his Frank side of the family was in Peterborough probably well before um, the Russells got up there. I'm not really sure when they got there, but it's kind of interesting to know some of that, because as a kid, thinking everybody came from slavery, I kind of hated doing the family trees. Nobody had, I'm like, we came from slaves. I can get back to my grandfather, but nobody, my grandma didn't have answers, and my grandfather had died in the 70s, so nobody could really answer any of my questions. I've since learned that this is Moses Frank. And he, let me zoom in. He was born, I'm trying to figure out, I think in New York, in Peterborough, and it says 1823. So that's before slavery was outlawed in New York State. So how did the Franks get up here? Who brought them up here? Did they come with Garrett Smith's father? Peter Smith bought, I think he was part of whatever the land tracks were, and part of the like Cazenovia, Peterborough, like he was a fur trapper. So it's just interesting to see all of this unfold. And then I went to the library downtown and met Kate, and she presented us with a bunch of books. And one of them was this book, and it a local man from Verona wrote a book about Peterborough, and it was interesting to go through it. And it's mostly about Garrett Smith and his family, and I think he was big into soccer, and somebody brought up a certain type of cow, and but a little known one little blurb, literally just this little picture, that, I'm sorry it's grainy, but that's how it was in the book, is George Frank, and that is Milton's grandfather. And it was, my aunt and I were so shocked to see this picture, because there are, even though the Franks have been in this general area, they were in Oneida from before the city of Oneida was formed. There aren't any pictures of Black people, which is kind of par for the course. Segregation. It was a much friendlier place to live than the South, but racism was still strong and abundant. It just looked different up here. So, but it's interesting to see this. His kids lived in Peterborough. He had a lot of daughters, and so to see the rich family history going back 100, 150, 200 years in Peterborough and Oneida is quite amazing to see. And so we have a bunch of questions, a lot of things we want to try to make connections to, but to finally have answers for my aunt and I is quite amazing when you don't know if you can research your heritage at all because you came from slavery. So that's my grandfather's side. On the other side is my grandma, and this is my grandma's dad, Frederick D. Bright. And my grandma is from Elmira, and she got sent to live up with her paternal uncle, so this guy's brother, and that's how my grandma got up here. My grandma's uncle had married a daughter of a Frank. So anyways, researching the Bright side, they were from, my grandma was from Elmira, and trying to research these guys, as you guys have probably seen, they all had the same name. He married a woman named Geraldine, and her father's name was Frederick D. So I was researching trying to find a house that had 3 people by the name of Frederick D living in it. Sometimes they were listed by their first name. Sometimes they were listed by their middle name. Sometimes they were listed as white, but he's not white. Sometimes, so having the address helped a lot. They lived in the same house for quite a while. In researching this, I realized that there were stories of my grandma going to visit her cousins from in Auburn, and my mom would talk about that and how my brother got baptized in Auburn, and my aunt said they went to go visit Uncle Buddy. His brother was Lawrence, I think Lawrence Bright, and I'm researching it, and it said that where he kind of lived, there was a seminary in Auburn, New York, and then Lawrence also named his son Lawrence because, let's use the same name, fun to research genealogy. Lawrence is, so the senior Lawrence was died around the same time as Harriet Tubman in Auburn. So I'm kind of interested to see if there's any connection to Harriet Tubman. This gentleman, Frederick, that you see on the screen, his parents were from Maryland. We found a Samuel Bright and a Margaret, and they were from Maryland. And Kirby, the person my grandma was sent up here to live with, he was born in Maryland too. So Kirby then went to Peterborough, and I'm not really sure how he got there, but part of me thinks that Auburn and Peterborough and Elmira were just known as safer places to be, maybe like a Green Book effect before the Green Book really existed. So I don't know if there's technically any relation to the Harriet Tubman family, but certainly Lawrence knew her. When going back in places like that, there weren't a lot of Black people in central New York. There weren't a lot in Madison County. When my aunt was growing up in the 60s, all the Black people knew each other, and they were really all related and cousins. We literally called each other cousins. My grandma kind of thought like you go through a yearbook and literally there's like 6 Black people and they're all related. So we have a bunch of questions, but it's kind of interesting now to at least have a direction, whereas before 2020 we didn't really know anything. And stories, were any of them part of the Great Migration? Another thing we found is there was something called the Freedmen's Bank that was made. It was the Savings and Trust Company, and it was for African Americans to put their money into. Somewhere along the way, the money wasn't used correctly, and the bank closed. And somebody through the Elmira line and Smith line had put money in there, and so we're kind of interested to know those things. How did we get up there? What connections do we have to Peterborough? What connections do we have to the family line with all of these things? Yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen. That's the bulk of what we've done so far. I can explain Peterborough more if you guys have questions. It's interesting to go back to the early 1800s when before you didn't know if anybody even like existed in Peterborough or how long they had been in Peterborough or if they had just come up as a stop on the Underground Railroad and a couple people had stayed. So I think that's the bulk of it. If anybody has questions, I'd love to answer them.
Heather, I think the first person you showed you said was your grandfather, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and he looked like he was in the military?
Yeah, he was in World War II. So we have his military records. What's
Okay,
interesting is we have some of his records and some of his other things. We have a receipt that my grandma purchased a tombstone for him, but when you go visit his gravesite, there is no tombstone for him. So, but yeah,
have you taken a look at newspapers? Because newspapers have a lot of information, especially for, smaller communities like Auburn and Elmira and places like that. And
so
probably Peterborough.
we will. So we've looked. I mean, I did. We have Milton's obituary and his brother Otto, and because we had Otto's obituary, his dad is listed, and that's how I knew I was going on the right track and found siblings and sisters and things like that. But that's the thing around here. If you go back into the early 1900s, and then the 1800s, I mean, we'll keep searching, but it's really hard to find any information listed about Black people. It just doesn't exist. We found there's like one picture of my mom being young and like two of my grandma that I've seen so far, but there just aren't, for a family that's been here for 200 years, there just aren't pictures. There aren't a whole lot of news stories about them.
Did you have any luck tracking down the church records in the community?
So we haven't gone to the churches yet. Some of that was COVID. We did it as much as we could online. We looked up threefold. We have a bunch of goals listed. A couple of them is to go to, so using that book that I showed you, they said that most of what he found he took from the Oneida Historical Society. So when the weather's a little bit nicer, we'll go out there with my aunt. She's in her 70s, so I wasn't going to do it in winter. And then Madison County has just posted a few days ago that they have records on their the migration of the Freedom Trail. So we'll go there and do that. It's really kind of a new revelation that they were in Auburn at the same time as Harriet Tubman. So it's interesting to go from having no information to starting to have leads and realizing you do have a rich history in this area, but it wasn't really talked about because the Black history isn't recorded the same way. So, I mean, thank goodness that there's census records and we can find that, but they're not in. So Kirby was a Mason to the highest degree, but we can't find anything about that. It was listed. I don't know what it was listed on, but we know they know that. I don't know. And just trying to piece some of those things together.
I was just listening to a webinar, and then they were talking about the Black newspapers. Amy Johnson Crow, it was a podcast from Amy Johnson Crow, and the gentleman she was interviewing was talking about the Black newspapers, about that there were articles in the big city newspapers. Sometimes they had, the larger cities had special Black newspapers. They were talking about Chicago and, some of the bigger cities and that. And to look in the regular papers too, that there's social columns that might give you some information about the Black community.
So Peterborough would be in the newspaper, but that's by virtue of Garrett Smith and what he did. So that would more be the white history, and we're kind of along for the ride because Peterborough's really one of those you blink and you missed it.
It was the social columns more that they were telling us, telling you to look at.
And you might,
Especially- and to go away from the area that you were, because sometimes they were published in bigger or larger newspapers. And to look at
Yeah.
the social columns for it, and that it was just a short 13-minute podcast and that, but it was quite interesting. If you go on amyjohnsоncrow.com, you can
Mhm.
find her Generations Cafe, which is her podcast. And this was an interview with I can't remember the guy's name. Started with a K. But it was one of the earlier podcasts. And she just did a repeat of it. And it was talking about finding the Black community in the social columns of some of these newspapers and that. So it was quite an interesting article, and I guess he's written a book about how on it too. So if you go on amyjohnsоncrow.com and go to her Generations Cafe podcast, I think it was an early one, but it'll tell you that she's interviewing somebody about the newspapers.
so there are, let me see if I can do this again.
And and how to find them and that. It was quite interesting.
So, let's see if this will come up. So this is Emancipation Day, and in the early 1900s, Peterborough celebrated that. Apparently, Garrett Smith kind of knew Abraham Lincoln. Maybe he had a copy of the Emancipation Proclamation that's been donated, I think, to a museum in New York. And in the early 1900s, everybody got together. So you'll hear and celebrated this. It was probably the 1920s. And in some of the early pictures, there are definitely family members, but that goes back to everybody in Peterborough was kind of a cousin. There weren't a lot of Black people, so everybody married everybody, second cousins, third cousins, but that often happened in the 1900s. Milton's brother, if I have the ancestry right, Milton's brother married their aunt. So it's interesting to see all of that. A few descendants of people in Peterborough now celebrate it. So every year on the first Saturday in August, they get together and talk about the heritage of Peterborough and Garrett Smith, and they bring in a speaker. The carriage barn that everybody came up in is still standing, so you can go see the carriage barn. The laundry where Harriet Russell, that woman who was sitting next to the ivory, her mom was the laundress, and a lot of people worked there. He gave good jobs to Civil War soldiers, Black people. That laundry building is still standing, so you can go see that building. So the first anti-slavery meeting, I don't know if it was in New York State, but one of the first ones was in a church in Peterborough, and that church is still standing, and it's usually open, I think, during Emancipation weekend. So that was quite interesting. It's interesting to go back and see the heritage. They all lived on one street in Peterborough. You kind of segregated the Black people a little bit, and a lot of the descendants are still in that area. It's interesting to know that your family's been on this street for 200 years, some of them. So, yeah.
You don't know if any of yours have come up from the South and that?
Well, so on Milton's side, maybe some of the spouses did. On my grandmother's side, most definitely. Like some of them started in Elmira, but her dad's family came up from Maryland. So they started in the South, and then some of the spouses started in the South. So there's some that gets harder to find. Like I found who could be my grandma's grandma, so my like great well, someone with the same name who's listed as Black, but because she's like 12, I can't prove that it's her in Maryland. Like, there's no way to know that that's her. So it kind of starts to get a little iffy to find people down there because you didn't log African Americans the same way, and there's no proof that it's that person. It's somebody born about the same time who the census says was Black. But other than that, I don't really know if it's the same person.
Heather, you might, I'm trying to remember, I think Frederick Douglass also had a newspaper, Black newspaper.
They did.
And probably
Yeah.
Kate knows better than I do, but I think it was up in upstate New York, and
It
I'm
was in
just wondering.
Rochester, which
Okay.
isn't, it's about an hour away from here.
Yeah,
And so he certainly saw the Frank side. So that would be my grandfather's side, definitely with Peterborough. But they were also just farmers, so you wouldn't hear as much about them per se.
okay, well, there's also, again, I'm just not familiar with that area particularly, but there's also like county directories, farm
Yeah.
directories, things
When you're
like that, which they
when
might
you're
be listed in.
when you're certainly Elmira family, oh my gosh, Elmira kept a really good directory, which sounds wonderful, but when you search ancestry.com, like more than half of your listings are just the phone directory, which helped confirm some things because the address was the same. And when Ancestry listed them as a white person and you knew it, well, I have the same name in the same house during the same years, you knew Ancestry was wrong, which helped when the last name was Smith because, as we know, Smith is quite common. But, we'll keep going. It's interesting to see that somebody had put money in the Freedoms Bank. I'm sorry it didn't go well. It would be interesting to see more about that. At this point, I'm really just happy to have gone back as far as we have in Onondaga County. We're gonna try to see in and Madison County and we'll explore some of the avenues and some of the things that are connected that we know of and see where we can go from there. It's nice to know. It's also kind of like a validation, like, hey, we were here just as much as everybody else was here, and it just wasn't talked about. It wasn't as publicized. It'd be interesting to know if if they did any of the jobs connected with helping build the infrastructure for Madison County. So yeah.
Hi. In regards to you finding a receipt for the tombstone,
Mm-hmm.
I once had trying to find a relative's tombstone and had like an old tent stake, sticking it in the ground, not to desecrate the area or anything, but had actually found a tombstone about 2 to 3 inches under the dirt. Maybe that could be a possibility just over time if it was a flat stone.
Maybe. I mean, I can certainly go back and check. So it was Milton, the first guy I pictured,
Yeah.
and I mean, now it's been 50 years, but my aunt doesn't ever remember a tombstone being put there. And when my grandma was younger, nobody really pursued it out of respect for her. But my grandma's in her 90s now and has some dementia. So when the summer comes around and we're going to want to be in Oneida more often, we will try to, that'll be one of the things we look into.
Did you
Okay.
say, excuse me, Heather, did you say he was in the military?
He was.
Because a family can apply for a free military headstone. You just need his military records to be able to prove
Okay, yeah, we have.
And
I
that's, so, you might try that. I'm not sure exactly which department of the military that you go through, but you could probably Google it um, and getting a military headstone, but military military headstones can be put in any cemetery and they are free. You just have to apply for them. And you have to
So-
have the proof that he was in the military.
we have some of his records, and I'll certainly look into that. I'm also very curious because we have something that says he had a headstone paid for. We went to the graveyard and looked and didn't see one on his plot.
Did you
We
find
went-
the monument company then that, are they
No,
still in business that made that that they bought it from?
I haven't found the monument company. I went to the funeral home to ask questions, but because it was from the 70s, that they didn't really want to seem to be, hey, we don't know anything, and they didn't really want to seem to look.
As my grandchildren tell me, Google it. Google the name of the monument company and see if you can find any information about it.
Yeah, I'll certainly.
So that would be another avenue, but if he was in the military, I would get a free headstone.
Yeah, I spent most of 2020 finding what we have now, and then we've been spending, well, life happened and I couldn't do much for 2 years. And we've been spending this year kind of organizing what we have and realizing what the library has to offer, because we're just so fortunate to have databases. We looked up Fold 3 and it didn't really have anything we didn't already have.
Well, it's a hard website to maneuver around in.
Yeah, if we're gonna find more, I'll have to find like what regiment and other things he was in, and then just kind of Google and find different things and just say he was in this regiment at this time. So,
But you're with your problem with your headstone, if you can't find that there's actually one already there and like she said, sunk in the ground.
Yeah.
Apply for a free military headstone for him.
yeah, I will certainly look into that. I'd like to. My aunt, Alita, his daughter has been she has a lot more time, and so she's been doing. I usually find this information, all the stuff you're giving to me, show her how to find the website, technology, and then we sit down and do some of that together.
That's good.
Heather,
Yes.
as you're talking, I just did a quick look and I actually found an application for a headstone. Did you find that?
So I haven't Googled. We had tried the sources.
Okay, but I found exactly what she was talking about. Milton G. Frank.
Okay.
It looks like his widow, Barbara Frank, applied for one of the military headstones, and there's an application online. So
Oh,
I'm assuming that, and it was for a flat granite marker,
yeah.
and
So
it was just supposed to have a Latin cross on it. And this was applied for in blah, 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 blah. Looks like it was applied for in February of 1978.
Yeah, so that must be because I have a paper that says something like that, but then there's no headstone when you go there.
And it
Do
was
you know
supposed,
who was, I'm sorry, go ahead.
it
We've
was
actually
supposed to
got,
be in-
Janine's had her hand up for a while to ask a question.
okay, can I just finish what I wanted to say? It
Yeah.
said that it was the place of burial was Greenwood Cemetery in Oneida, New York. Okay.
So I apologize for the background noise. I'm at the Y. I only got out of the pool like 10 minutes before this, so my bad.
Okay.
The Rochester Record is a newspaper that's available through FultonHistory.com. I have found early 20th century records for my family. It's basically something that lawyers used. So any property transaction, any legal transaction, not only in Monroe County, but in Onondaga County, is recorded there. Like my grandfather registering his car in 1920 something is in there. I don't think it would have mattered the race of the person who had a business transaction. So I'd check out the Rochester record. It appears they started in the 20th century, not before, but there might be something useful.
Is that
Yep.
like, is that what it's called, the Rochester record?
You'll find it on FultonHistory.com, but I'd go into FultonHistory.com and look up specific names and see if there's anything recorded there. And if it comes up that it's in the Rochester record, by all means, look at it, whether it was Onondaga County or maybe even Madison, certainly Monroe, it will be there.
And
Cool.
Fulton History is a free website.
Okay. Yeah,
You
so
can
I
do
have, I
that
think
from
I
home.
have,
It's one of those nice free ones.
yeah. I think I have the military, I have a copy of her application for burial benefits. So maybe that's what you're seeing. That says it was Glenwood Cemetery, the date of the burial and everything. There's just so we'll figure out who to talk to through this to figure out where to go next.
The cemetery should have record of the
Again,
cemetery usually is the one that puts the monument in. So
yeah,
have you gone to the cemetery office?
yeah. So we didn't get a lot of answers in phone calls. I can't remember when we went up. They let us, there's one building, they let us look. There are actually some flat stones not on graves, just hanging out in a building. And his stone wasn't on any of that. And we keep running into, everybody's like, we're sorry that's happened, and doesn't really want to talk or pursue any more than that. They don't want to answer any questions. They don't want to try to collaborate with us to figure out what may have happened. Just, it's from the 70s. We're sorry that happened, and they kind of hope we stop talking. So as far as his headstone, but I'll look up these things. I do want to pursue, Oneida the Oneida Library just got a new historian. So we plan on going down there and picking her brain about a lot of things.
You know, Heather, this is Dan. One thing you might want to do the next time you go to the cemetery, bring along a pole that you can stick into the ground, because sometimes those things over the years, they settle. And if grass grows over it and you just poke down anywhere from 4 to 5 inches, you might come across a thud, and it could be the stone.
That's a good idea. So my aunt, I think for my aunt and my mom, they don't even remember it being installed at all, period.
Mhm.
I will certainly check, in grief, sometimes you forget with all the other day-to-day things you're doing.
Right.
So, but I'll certainly make arrangements to try to go back to the cemetery and bring a pole and look that up.
I was wondering about the Auburn Cemetery, whether your family that's from there, Harriet Tubman is buried in the Auburn Cemetery. It's possible they might be also. I don't know where those records are, but that's another avenue.
So that it's a wonderful story, and I definitely want to pursue learning about that. And like, did she help them come up? Did she inspire them to come up? It wasn't it isn't exactly a direct lineage, so we weren't going down that trail as much because it was, my grandma's uncle's side of all of these things. And I think I know I was kind of overwhelmed looking. I'm sure you guys have done the whole, I'm gonna search for a couple hours every so often, and then you just can't even look at a screen, and it all starts to get blurry. And I was like, I quit.
Heather,
So-
just to follow up with what Molly said, that the Harriet Tubman Museum, I'm from Auburn, so there's an extensive information there, and the curators are more than happy to help. In fact, Pauline Johnson, who I know, I used to work with her, she's in her 90s, she's a direct descendant of Harriet. So that may be another avenue. And as far as church records are concerned, Harriet Tubman's church, which was in disrepair, is almost finished being renovated. So those records from that church may be available someplace else. But again, I think the curator of the Harriet Tubman Museum would probably have a lot more information on how that all could be put together for you. So maybe a trip to Auburn may be worth it. Maybe calling first and explain to them what you're trying to do. They've been very helpful to a great number of people who were in your predicament that were looking for more information on their families. And like I say, good luck.
Yeah, that's certainly on the map. We actually, through this meeting, last I think that's what it is. When we presented our goals in December, she was like, "Oh, send me an email." And so I sent her an email, and she's like, "Oh, one of my colleagues is a descendant of Harriet Tubman, and her family's from Auburn. And why don't you guys start emailing?" And we did. And I was very fortunate to meet her. We were trying to link our trees together to see if there was any overlap, and we couldn't find an overlap. Definitely the paths crossed, and we kind of confirmed that much. We weren't sure if anybody was related on both trees from what that person had. But it's super exciting to start to meet people and see that you finally found the right information.
It's a lifetime hobby.
It is. Well, and there's so many. So I've been trying to do as much as I could without the travel because I'm a mom and I have kids and 2020 and I work. Another thing is these people came up as slaves and limited rights and all of that. And now I work part-time at the Board of Elections. So I do a lot of, it's like seasonal per diem, if that makes sense. I just help out during the busy election season. And so to have people who came up as slaves and then I, on election day, work as a poll site manager to know that they're suffering and all the things that they went through, they probably couldn't have even imagined that one of their descendants would be able to vote, let alone work for the Board of Elections. So, very good.
Heather, have you taken a look at Family Search? I found a little bit of information about Milton Frank and his family.
So my aunt did a lot of her search on Family Search because it was free. I didn't find anything on Family Search that wasn't already on Ancestry.
Okay.
And then a couple of the people, that was through the Frank line. When I looked through the Brights, that was all listed weird and the names were wrong. And I went, I'm not even going to try since Ancestry is free right now. So.
And you might, I know you said you're busy, but you might take a look at Roots Tech, the conference that's coming up next week. You can go, it's free to sign up. You can go through that and see if there may be some webinars which relate to your ancestors. It might be some of interest about how to research in New York or how to research your Black ancestors or things like that. It there's I think several hundred webinars, so you might find something that might be of value to you that would give you some clues as to what your next direction would be.
Yeah.
What was that called
100
again?
It's called Roots Tech.
Yeah.
ROOTTSTECH. Roots Tech 24. Just throw it in Google. It'll come up in 1 second. And it's free for people who watch it remotely. And if you're there, it's in Salt Lake. It's you have to pay, but it's free online. So.
And there are some webinars from the past Roots Tech conferences also
Yes.
available online.
Yes, it's
That you
through
can
Family
watch.
Search.
It's an excellent educational,
Yes,
Yeah.
and I'm actually going to be there.
Oh,
So
how
I've
neat.
looked at the sessions, and I know there's one that deals with the Freedmen's Bureau
Okay.
records. So, but there were several. There's about 149 online or hybrid sessions.
Yes, that speech on the Freedmen's Bureau is by Renata Sanders, Yarborough Sanders, and she just did that same talk at our society last Saturday, and it is excellent. It's a very educational, well presented, and Renata does. She has a website and she does Black research professionally in that. She's very, very good speaker. So please try to catch that one.
Yeah.
Heather,
Um,
Give
here's
you
the thing.
a lot of information.
Here's the thing, Heather. You said you're busy. You can go on there, pick out some webinars you're interested in, and even if you can't see them at the particular time, you can log in a week or 2 weeks or a month later, and many of them, I think most of them are recorded, so you can go back and you can just put them in, like, your stuff to look at a later time if you don't have time to look at it.
Can I add to what Scott said? I waited a whole year and it was the next Roots Tech. And I found myself signing up for things I had signed up for a year before. They were still available to me. So you don't just have a week, 2 weeks, a month. You have at least 2 years.
They actually made it 3 years now.
Okay.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of
So
them
I
are
can
still
finally
online.
watch them.
Yeah, most of them are still online.
Yeah.
Available to watch.
And
So-
if nothing else, I can Google or search YouTube for the speaker once I have a name and look at things that way.
Now, Heather, I have a question for you. Have you done any work with DNA research? Because that would maybe be the next step for you. Your grandmother would be perfect, because they always say you should check the oldest generation, to get clues about, previous generations to them.
Can I add to Scott's on that? We did that with the oldest generation. I have an aunt who is going to be 101 next week. And we did her DNA, and that solved our 30-year mystery.
Oh, that's cool.
That was that connected, her DNA connected my second great grandfather, which would be her great grandfather, to the family in Onondaga that I had been researching for years. We finally got the connection to it through DNA. So and you can get kits through Ancestry that sometimes they're on sale.
Yeah.
But start with your grandmother. Or any aunts, anybody that's, the oldest generations, not just your direct line, but your aunts and that will give you Scott was very right on that. So.
Heather, it's Dan again. I was doing some research through DNA for years, and my wife was adopted, and her adoption records were lost over the years. And when New York State in 2018 or 19, they made it possible to get your records, copies of your records. And she was going to do that. Unfortunately, she passed away in 2020. And when the pandemic hit, we couldn't do anything with it. But I have gotten people, because she had her DNA done, I have connected with family that are part of her biological family and through DNA. And I have traced her lineage back to the Revolutionary War. So there's a lot of information that's available there. It's worth digging. I'm still digging into that. And I haven't done the things for the state because I still want to get those records because my wife passed away. Turns out she had some serious blood clots in her legs. It was part of her illness, but one of my sons had last year had a blood clot that affected his kidneys for a while, and the doctor suggested that we find out what the situation is, how far back it goes. So I applied to my insurance company, but they wouldn't approve it because they said it wasn't medically necessary, which I'm fighting now. But still, it was a health issue that we were looking
Yeah.
at. And I'm going to now do that to get her records because now that the pandemic stuff is over, she decided to wait a year when it first came out because she figured everybody and his brother was going to be going after it. And but unfortunately, she passed away, so she couldn't do it herself. So that's why I'm trying to do it now. So it'll help. And through my mother is the oldest person that I was able to get in my family to do the DNA. And I have had contact with people in Moldova and what it had relations biologically with DNA with my mother. So
Cool.
it's amazing the kind of information and the contacts you make. Don't discount it.
And Heather, I don't know if you're familiar that on Family Search, they have one universal tree. You don't put your tree on there. You put enough information so that you can, enough generations so you can be connected into the tree.
Yep.
Okay. So, and as part of Root Tech, they have, I'm sure Kate knows this, they have relatives at Roots Tech. So that when you're connected to the universal tree, you can see all the people who are related to you who are attending the conference. And the number just kind of gets progressively larger and larger and larger. I think last year I maybe had 5,000 or 6,000 people who were my relatives, if you will, at the conference. This year I checked yesterday, and it's something like, at this point, it's about 2,500 people who are my relatives at Root Tech. And it shows you who they are, where they are, and how they're related to you. So you tap on their face or you tap on their name, and it comes up with a chart and shows you exactly how they're related to you. Albeit many of them are distantly related. I don't spend 1 second on somebody who's my 10th cousin 3 times removed. But second cousin, third cousin, fourth cousin, definitely worth checking out.
Oh.
Yeah.
I also want to mention, I put in the chat, Kenyatta Berry, who used to co-host the Genealogy Roadshow. She's done a really good African-American study of her family who came up from Virginia and ended up in Rochester, and tracing them back and the migration patterns. So I would guess there's probably similar record issues and challenges that you would have, but it might be good to look at some of her work because I've seen her present here in New York, and it's really a fascinating story, and there might be clues there as to avenues to pursue that she used.
Yeah. Thank you. I did see that and I wrote down her name.
Okay.
Yeah, and another one that I get on Legacy is Robin Smith. She's does Black she is Black and does the research, African American research and that, and she does a lot of webinars on Legacy, and she speaks at a lot of other genealogy societies and that. One of the ways where I follow some of her talks is through Conference Keeper. It's what is it? conferencekeeper.org. And you can go, that's how I found this one is going on that. And then you just click on theirs and then sign up, and then you get on, you get on different Zoom meet meetings and that with it, and different speakers, and you can look to see where they're speaking on African American research, and that might help you. The more education you get, the easier it's going to be to find your people.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. There's a lot of places to start and a lot of things to look into. So,
Well, I've
Yeah,
been doing this.
congratulations on so far. It's really fascinating what you've been able to do so far.
that's the part, like, even if it all stopped now, I think my
Yeah,
aunt
it's
was
amazing.
happy with, you went from not knowing how you were connected from where you were connected. So have all of that information.
No, I'm trying to, I want
To have all of that information now is just amazing, and to be able to go back to really how many 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 6 or 7 generations.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. When you didn't, most of my life growing up, I couldn't go much past my grandfather. I knew, and Peterborough, all the Black people kind of called each other cousin. And it wasn't until recently that we realized we actually are cousins. We thought we were kind of all doing it because we were just a Black community. And oh no, they were literally all related. It was literally all family. And so to see how that connects and to know the history goes back. At one point, I know most of all of that land was called Onondaga County. So we're getting back far enough that we've reached almost the beginning of Madison County. So we have to figure out what it was called before that and find out the name. Peterborough is close enough to Cazenovia that sometimes the records are listed as Cazenovia. Sometimes the records are listed as Peterborough sometimes, and Peterborough, because it was close to Cazenovia and some of the other things, Oneida's the actual city now, but Peterborough might have had more happening as far as a town and a city than Oneida did for a long time. So,
Okay. Heather, a way to find out the dates of the county is the Newberry Library Library has an atlas of county boundaries, and it'll show the county, the changes of the boundaries. And another way you can find it is on the Family Search Wiki. And you would put in the name of the town or the county, and you can tell they'll give you the year of the formation and what the parent counties were.
yeah, I'll certainly.
That's another way. But that atlas of what is it? An atlas of American counties. It's a whole U.S., but you can click on just New York and find the evolution of all the counties there in New York. And it's from the Newberry Library in Chicago.
Excuse me. And if you're looking for Cazenovian newspapers, they are free through the Cazenovia Library. Many of them have been digitized. So you might just want to search their database.
I know a lot through Peterborough, and that's there. It's more important when you're searching, when you find newspaper records and it says somebody died in Cazenovia. As far as people like outside of that general area, it was all the same. That even still today, it kind of gets lost in some of the addresses. Like you'll see something and they'll say, oh, it's kind of like when you reach Onondaga County and people from outside of here say they're in Syracuse, and you're like, no, you're in DeWitt right now, not Syracuse. But it didn't matter to some. So.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Heather?
Heather, I just have one more comment. I don't know if you're familiar with the series Finding Your Roots with Dr. Henry Gates.
Yeah.
I don't know what, it's on Mondays nights, and he does a lot of African American people. He had I don't remember, a comedian on this past week.
He's doing LeVar Burton soon.
Okay, and he's done many of them. And I know there, you just Google Finding Your Roots, and you can look at the people, and you can actually look at the episodes. And you know, his methodology might be of value to you as to how they went about you know, finding these people. And he seems to have of course, he's only going to have the programs that have good success, but he seems to have pretty good success with being able to get people back you know, many generations. And of course, I'm sure you're aware, you know, finding enslaved people is challenging because, you know, in the 1840 and 50 and I think 60 census, they weren't listed by name.
Right.
But he has some methodology for getting around that and being able to link up what they found with other records to be able to establish, you know, that these people and you don't know, sometimes some of the people he portrays are free slaves, or I'm sorry, not free slaves, they're free people of color.
Yeah.
So they are obviously listed in the census and other records also. So might be worth a look, just to take a look and see who he's done recently. He did, I can't remember his name, but he did a comedian this past Monday.
Yeah.
I took a look.
Yes,
Go ahead, Doris.
I have, do you have directories in your area?
I mean, older directories. I
Yes.
haven't found any for Oneida. The Elmira family directories are on Ancestry, so I've seen that, and that's confirmed who's lived in that house and things like that. But I haven't found any for Madison County yet.
Okay. I know my my paternal grandfather was born enslaved, and I was able to trace him from the 1870 census to his death, which and a lot of information. I didn't know his name or anything. I just happened to run across a census with my father and aunt on the census, and learned that I had 5 other aunts and uncle that I never knew about, because they were paternal. I knew about my maternal side, because she told all the stories. So I didn't have the problems researching them that I did with my father on my paternal side. But the directory, a city directory, did help me trace them coming forward. I'm in Georgia, and at the time he had worked in Atlanta, and so the Atlanta city directory really kept up with where he was when he was living in Atlanta.
Great.
And one more, if I may. I looked at the Casanova paper for Petersboro. There were 7 hits. The first one was a fire. The second was a suicide, which reminds me, I have a suicide murder in my family. It got covered all over the country. People picked up news from paper to paper that they thought would get their readers' interest. So if there's any tabloids like stuff in your family, that might have made it in newspapers outside of the area they lived in, for what it's worth.
Okay, since it's after 11, I'd love to be able to stay on with y'all. But we'll wrap this up now. And the next genealogy group will be on Friday, March 22nd, and you'll get to hear basically what my experience was at Roots Tech. This is my first time going in person, and I'm trying to figure out how to clone myself so I can see all the programs that I want to, sessions that I want to go see.
Good one.
So the next, if you're interested in local history, the next local history one will be March 8th, Friday, March 8th, same time, the 10 to 11 slot. And it'll be with Dr. Danielle Nagel of the Matilda Joslin Gage Foundation. She'll be speaking about Matilda Joslin Gage and the suffragette movement in Central New York.
Wow.
Is it the same link, Kate?
Yeah.
Yes, it's the same link, and
Same link.
it's up on the calendar, but I'll be sending out the notices as well.
Thank you so much.
Great, thanks,
Kate.
Heather, terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you. I
Yes,
really
thank you so
appreciate
much,
it.
Heather.
Take
This
care,
was wonderful.
everybody.
Thank
Heather,
you.
good
you,
luck
Heather.
with
Hi,
the
Molly.
work
Bye,
at the
everybody.
polls.
Wonderful.
Thanks. Good luck with your search.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Great.
Yes, good luck.